This is another plenary. It's the compostable organics out of landfill now, cool now, and incineration now. And really the goal of this panel is to motivate our members to go out to their local government and ask to remanage organics away from landfill back to the farms and composting facilities. Today we have a series of experts that are part of our panel. You can go to our website, you'll be able to get more information. I'll start right now with Peter Anderson, the president of Recycle World. Peter, you're on. While we're waiting, I want to praise our sponsor, Sure Clothes, the handy pail for your kitchen for your organics. Peter, go.
Thank you, Rick. And this panel is to be looking at the fact that more than 1/2 of the stuff in our landfills is organic, that getting organics out of landfills is zero waste. And in the political context,
I am sharing the screen for you, okay? If you
I'm
will just
going to
tell
move
me
to my
when to.
wife's computer. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Tell us a bit more about those kitchen pails there, Rick.
Oh, well, Sure Clothes is a sponsor and they're good for, I just want to say that the COP, all nations got together that methane from the landfills was like a predominant problem of global warming and set the world on the agenda to move forward. And that's why what Peter has to say is so important.
Next slide, please.
There you go.
So the thing to understand is the first point is that landfill gas collection was never intended to minimize greenhouse gases. It was basically a short-term jury-rigged device to keep methane that was generated in the landfills from migrating to adjoining buildings and exploding and killing people. And the reality is that the gas collection systems are inherently flawed. They did so by using the formula. How effective these systems are is the gas captured over the total gas generation. The problem is they didn't know the total gas generation. All they knew was the gas captured. And so they made up formulas they thought would provide that answer. But when the California Waste Board tested that formula, gas capture rates as high as 225%, which was obviously ridiculous. So the way the gas collection systems work is that they basically put the waste stream and they perforate those straws and they attach the straws or these gas pipes that are perforated to a negative pressure fan in reverse, and it sucks the gas out. The problem is that the gas is only generated in the part of the landfill which is open. It's built in segments, and the middle part here is open. The other part here in this picture are closed, not being generated any longer in the closed landfill because there's no moisture left there. It's just being generated in the working face. And in the working face, you don't have a cover. And if you don't have a cover, you will be pulling not just the gas from the surrounding waste matrix, but also oxygen from the surface. The surface mixes with methane. It creates explosions, which the engineers call not good. The result is a situation. This slide is showing 3 phases of the section that is open, the first phase. And in that phase, there's a lot of gas being generated, but because you would be pulling oxygen from the surface, it cannot actually operate without causing an explosion. So there's no gas collection, just a lot of gas. After the landfill segment is closed, there's no moisture, so there's not much gas, and gas collection is very effective. At the third phase, after the landfill is closed, eventually the cap degrades, moisture re-enters and creates a lot of gas, but there's no gas collection there either. So at the first phase, a lot of gas, no gas collection. The second phase, gas collection is great, but there's no gas. If you've been in a school with kids, you may recognize that it's kind of like a double Dutch jump rope. But the bottom line is, as the IPCC concluded in 2007, they said on an integrated or lifetime basis, landfill gas collection is as low as 20%, which means 80% of it escapes. And if we understand that, when we look at what's going on in the climate change world, the efforts to get the CO2 cut back with the utility segments have been cut out by Senator Manchin. And what's going on with the folks who are the strategists for climate change is to move all the attention that we can to beating back methane emissions, because methane emissions constitute, they are about 84 times more potent than our CO2. So a quick hit to get so we get some buy time while the political situation hopefully sorts itself out. All that attention by the climate change gurus in Washington has been focused on gas leaks from oil wells. It's our job to convince them that they really have to be on landfills and getting organics out of them. And I hope we all can repeat that message, because as we all know from the last 4 years of Mr. Trump, repetition becomes truth.
Well, let's wind it up, Peter, but
I recognize that all that was pretty fast for all that stuff. And the joke that James Thurber said about the little girl book critic who wrote tells me more about penguins than I want to know. But if you do want to know more and get some progress here on the political front, here are some readings that are posted on our website.
all right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter Anderson. So methane is a real
My
problem.
apologies for the technical.
It's all right. So Chris, you want to load up Dr. Sally Brown, University of Washington.
Hey there, methane is a very bad thing. There is no doubt that taking food scraps out of a landfill just for methane avoidance is a noble and critical gesture. But there's a whole world beyond methane avoidance. And taking those food scraps out of a landfill, taking that yard waste out of a landfill, taking that stuff you flush and treating it so it can work on the soil is just a fabulous tool to make the world a pretty place. So in just a few minutes, I'll try and convince you of this. I'm Sally Brown, and here's my email. When you look at the EPA WARM model, they give you a good credit for methane avoidance. And not in reference to that, not such a big credit for soil use. EPA gives you about 0.2 tons of CO2 for each ton of food scraps diverted for carbon storage. And they talk about those other values such as nutrients, soil health, resiliency in agriculture. But reading about it and seeing it are two different things. For example, when you talk about the benefits of methane avoidance versus soil uses and those associated benefits, here's a graph from something I did from King County, City of Seattle, where I live, and here's a link to that. If you look, the blue in each of these end uses is by far the biggest value, and that's your landfill diversion. And the yellow, and this is from data, not default values, is much smaller in comparison. So doesn't look so good, but on a landscape, it really adds up. And it really adds up when you think of how disturbed soils in general are and how much they really appreciate being restored, getting fed, and recycled organics are the best food we have for soils. Here's a link to a column I wrote for Biocycle on this, and you can see some reference to soils in Biosolids product, Bloom from Washington, D.C., and here's your King County loop. Carbon increase from digested biosolids and from green compost are enormous, and it's much better than cover crops. It's much better than no-till agriculture. It's the best tool that we have to restore soils to health. From my own work, I've seen this. In dryland wheat with biosolids, compost in landscape plants, compost to orchards, adding either one to the side of roadways to grow your grass. In each of these cases, with long-term studies, soil carbon, soil nitrogen, and soil water holding capacity. And that is critical as we face climate change. To bring it further home and to bring it to a city and to see what it looks like, one of the things we've done is a lot of work with compost and biosolids and other organics for urban agriculture. Here's a picture of a community garden in Tacoma, Washington, where everybody has access to a biosolid soil product and a yard waste soil product, and boy, does that make that garden grow. Book one of two that we authored or edited on this topic, and you can see You build that soil, and boy, do you get a kale Caesar salad. This is fertilizer control, and this is with a biosolids-based soil product. There's enough Caesar for everybody at the conference just from that one plot. Community gardens are one great end use. Home gardens are another great end use. Green stormwater infrastructure, a wonderful end use. Makes your cities prettier, makes your roadways lovely, and reduces flooding and reduces contamination going from stormwater systems. So using compost and green infrastructure is a fabulous tool. Using it on the side of roadways. You don't think about that. You don't think of it as very glamorous, but it's a wonderful, wonderful way to reduce flooding on highways and to make it so highways are green and not so awful to drive on. If you go back to that kale Caesar here and you go to Drawdown, one of their big tools and solutions is a plant-based diet. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that you get a whole lot more plants from the soil that's healthy because it's been amended with composts and other residuals rather than with using synthetic fertilizer. And finally, to end on a bit of a high note here, so to speak, another wonderful use of compost is for a growing cannabis industry, which has its own rewards. In other words, taking food scraps out of a landfill is a wonderful way to avoid methane, but it's a wonderful way to give you so much more. And thanks.
Sally Brown. Hey, I appreciate that remark. Okay, and next up now is Kevin Drew from Marin County, San Francisco, talking about carbon farming. Kevin, you're on.
Thanks, Rick. Actually, you know what? I could talk about SureClose, Rick, because I've been using SureClose kitchen paper for over 10 years here in San Francisco, and they were the fourth or fifth iteration that we had, and they are the ones we're sticking with. They really work well, and I use them myself at home every day. I'll stop there. I'm Kevin Drew with the city's San Francisco Department of the Environment, and what I wanted to follow up from what Peter was talking about, the dangers of methane, about how good compost can be in a city, which Sally has covered in a great way, but I just want to tell you a little more about San Francisco's program. This picture on our front cover here is the fog over San Francisco, which is a climactic effect. It's iconic in San Francisco, and it's changing. I've been here 44 years this month, and it's not the way it used to be. So we're seeing climate change, and we need to do something about it. And almost as iconic as our fog is the San Francisco's 3-bin system, which we started back in 1999. We really started kind of the vanguard of urban organic recovery that going back 20 years, over 20 years, that is now reaching the whole state of California is required to have this. But basically, using the green bin to capture the organic fraction of what every business, every residence, every apartment building in the city of San Francisco uses. As you can see there, we did start it in 1999, but made it mandatory in 2009. And everybody knows what goes in the container. It's your food scraps, your food soil paper, also your green waste. And we do take compostable bags, which has been compostable plastics, which we are struggling with exactly how to make that work going forward because they don't seem to break down as much as we'd like. And what we found from this process was that people really begin to understand the carbon nutrient loop. They know that their food scraps can be made back into something that's valuable. They learn to separate them, they learn to put in the right place, and then we take it from there. The city has the large scale compost operation. What that beautiful compost is doing is growing our food that we're eating the next day or the next week or the next year. Could be wine that's even 10 years from now that we grow from the food scraps of yesterday. This is just what Sally was talking about, just seeing the real life that's in compost and figuring out what best to do with it. And this is a chart we're going to go quickly over. We just passed 25 million tons of organics that we've collected in the over the 20 some years that we've been collecting it. So that all of that material has been composted in California and used on California agricultural fields. not always to the highest and best use of the climate, but always for the highest and best use of the grower who's buying that material. Whether they're growing grapes or table vegetables, they're making that choice. And what we're finding now through our research is that there's options for cities and counties and everyone really to make a smarter choice in terms of the climate impact. This is what that looks like at a scale. As you can see, there's a lot of good soil soothing compost ready to be made from San Francisco's food scraps. And what we found from our recent, the last 10 years of research by the Wind Carbon Project, UC Berkeley, and a lot of very dedicated environmentalists, scientists, ranchers, resource conservation districts, a huge infrastructure of folks that are out there farming already, have learned that by putting just a small amount of compost, a quarter inch in this case, over the rangeland that you see here in this picture, will stimulate the soil to absorb more carbon. It's really quite fascinating to see what impact it has. The two people in front of that picture there on the left is Jeff Creek and on the right is John Wick, and they've just been really toiling in the fields now for over 13 years to prove that the theory they had is true. And the question was, would it make a difference if you put a little bit of compost out there in terms of the actual soil function? This slide shows this is 6 years after one application of compost on this land's hillside. And the cows, as you can see, are finding the good spot, the sweet spot. They know what they're doing out there. And this is what's happened with the research we've shown. One treatment of compost can last 10 to 30 years, having the same impact of increased carbon sequestration by that soil, by the grass and the soil structure below, simply from the use of that compost. We think this is a evolution of what the linear economy to a circular economy to really a regenerative society. We have to think of ourselves as a part of the system the ecosystem we're in, and we need to develop our role in that in a fashion that truly regenerates ourselves and all the other creatures and systems in that larger ecosystem. This is a chart of our graph of how we think the impact could be done if we get all of our compost used in the highest and best use. We're talking about a 25% GHG emissions from the city being countered by that much absorption by the soil just by the year 2030. Our mayor announced yesterday, I believe, that we're going to get to net carbon zero by 2040. And she didn't even have our negative carbon numbers in there. Seeing this as a way for us for not just us, but for all cities and counties to make a dramatic difference in their carbon profile and improve their soil. This is really what we call our black gold. This is putting it as a cover crop. Actually, it's between the rows of the vineyards. We'll grow a cover crop. They're actually putting compost on the roots on the base of the vines right there. And it really produces better wine and lots of carbon in the ground. And this is just to give you a sense of what we're facing as a global level. Rangeland or kind of pasture land, open space, is 30% of the global land surface. It's the largest cover type of any single type on the planet. So we can do this everywhere, and everywhere we're generating food scraps and organic material that is ripe for making into compost. Paul Hawken and Project Drawdown did a nice job at analyzing our ability to turn around climate change. We think that we can absorb a gigaton of carbon out of the atmosphere by 2050. And the calculations that we're doing show that rangeland and pasture and the use of compost is a huge component of that. And it could cost just 1% of our GDP. That'd be $1 trillion we'd be putting into this. This is just a picture of the United States, of really North America, showing, so you've all flown over it, you know how much rangeland is out there. It's within reach of our equipment. It's within reach of our food scraps and waste streams that are not waste streams. And you'll see on this next, this is the kids that are helping us get the compost out of the waste stream and back onto the fields. And this is the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin Drew, San Francisco. And that's his information. Next up is Brenda Platt, the president of Institute of Local Self-Reliance and Compost Queen of Maryland. Brenda?
All right, so it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm joining you from Maryland, just out of Washington, D.C., on the ancestral lands of the Anacostans and Piscataway peoples. And Rick asked me to talk today about the role of composting and aiming for zero waste, and in particular, some of the policies we might be advocating for. That's a picture of me making my own black gold. So I like to start with what is compost. You know, we've seen some pictures from Kevin and Sally, but it is really this beautiful black gold. And it's a dark, crumbly, earthy smelling material that results from the controlled decomposition of organic materials. And when it's added to soil, it improves its biological, chemical, and physical characteristics. It also improves soil's ability to support plants and beneficial organisms. This, by the way, is part of a much larger poster that you can download at that URL that's at the bottom there, with a number of other posters we've produced. If you're interested more on the Carbon Farming Project or Sally Brown talking, we did a series of webinars on compost climate connection, the Compost Climate Connection. So check those out. There's quite a number of them, and it will just blow your mind, all the connections. And, you know, we know that we can't get to zero waste without reducing and diverting organics from disposal. 1/5 of what we send to disposal in the US, this is after recycling, is wasted food alone. It's really, really criminal, I think. The good news is that composting and using compost in, say, green infrastructure, not just ag and uses and applications, creates many more jobs than landfilling or burning trash. Here at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, we've been documenting this for many years. For every 10,000 tons of waste going into incinerator, you may have one full-time equivalent job. Landfilling, it's about the same, really. But just making compost, and this is at commercial industrial facilities, it's 4 times the number of jobs as landfilling. But because it's not a linear flow of materials to disposal, you know, you're making a product. When you're using that compost in green infrastructure, you're creating 6 times the number of jobs. And I believe that if we had a decentralized and diversified infrastructure for composting, the number of jobs would just, you know, skyrocket. So this is kind of what we're doing now. We're landfilling and burning. This is the Baltimore incinerator, when instead we could be producing this black gold and adding it to soil. So I'm just always like, why? Seriously, why? And it's really vested interest and big waste, and probably many other reasons. So we do need new rules. My colleague David Morris, who is one of the founders of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, would say we make the rules and the rules make us. So we're seeing you know, more bans. We're seeing food scrap recovery requirements. We're seeing clearer permitting roadmaps. We've been documenting some of these rules in our composting rules library. We're seeing more and more state and local rules requiring wasted food be diverted. I think Austin and San Francisco are 2 well-known local examples. One thing that often gets overlooked in composting is the importance of procurement policies. If you're not buying recycled content products, you're not completing the recycling loop. Well, of course, the same is true for compost. So we really need procurement policies to drive demand, and those can happen just like with recycling at the business level, the institution level, the local government level, and the state government. In King County, Washington soil standard is a good example where it requires that soils that are disturbed or damaged by human development, you know, need to be restored by incorporating compost. King County is not alone. There's a number of local governments that have passed similar requirements. I call those minimum organic matter requirements. So in Leander, Texas, for example, new turf grass or lawns, they're required to have a minimum soil depth of 6 inches that consist of 25% compost. In Seattle, planting beds, landscape beds have to have 35 to 40% compost by volume. So how are we going to meet this new demand for compost? And one of the things I like to say that's really a benefit of composting is that it can be small scale and large scale and literally everything in between. There's lots of ways to compost. There's lots of sizes. even within home composting, there are many systems and there's many program options. Home composting, by the way, in my mind, is too often overlooked in terms of programming and investment. So I had to write a guide for local government on how to do more. So I hope you will, if you're with local government, you'll pay more attention to this. But one thing I just want to emphasize in my remarks today is that there are so many benefits when the composting takes place locally. You know, it enhances local soils, it engages and educates youth, harnesses the power of volunteers, provides that local jobs and skills training, keeps those jobs local, helps address local food security, greens neighborhoods. And of course, we're supporting urban and rural farmers and also having a higher quality compost. So Rick's popping in to tell me to wrap up. Is that right,
Yeah,
Rick?
1 minute. Yeah, 1 minute.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm good. So we
Here's
have a
the video.
Yeah, we have a video. I'm not going to show it today. Just you can check that out at that link. What is community composting? We're doing a lot more on farm to promote on-farm composting. And I'll just conclude by saying, you know, what kind of infrastructure do we want? If we want, you know, an infrastructure that produces high quality compost and is going to farmers and benefiting communities, then we need policies to enact that focus on that. And we need to direct funding, you know, to those policies. And we have this hierarchy that looks at scale. So we're very much focused on promoting, of course, prevent waste, rescue food to feed people, but then we would like to see small scale decentralized farmers supported before large scale. And when we look at the spectrum of composting options and the policies, they're really mostly here on large scale. There's not much in the middle promoting all of these neighborhood level farm cooperatives. So we need more permitting regulations to allow farmers. And I'll just conclude, you'll have a copy of this, but where I think the focus really needs to be is incentivizing segregated clean organics. And we got to fight for health, for a diverse and distributed infrastructure and those investment dollars, and fight against policies that privilege just large scale sites. So there's my contact information, and I will stop sharing screen. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. That was brilliant. I think we are spot on, as they say. Our next speaker is Captain Charles Moore. You know him from marine debris, but even while he was still fishing and sampling, he was doing organic gardening in the city. And I would like now to introduce Charlie Moore, who's going to talk about urban farming.
Okay, I'll share my screen in a second. I'll make a few introductory remarks. I'm coming to you from Puvugna, the sacred site of the Tongva and Ahachiman people. We're in the southern corner of Los Angeles County. And what I want to share with you today is 37 years of me farming in my own local home and in my own local community. So what I believe is that we're making regenerative people and a regenerative economy impossible by the way we're developing in the cities. And the contradiction is appearing right now in California with legislation that is allowing single family homes to have tiny homes built in their backyard. You just have a developer come in, and if we're going to have life in the city beyond our domestic plants and animals, we need to have open space in the city. And so one of the things I'm doing is creating an infrastructure in my own home for dealing with that. So what I started was Captain Charlie's Urban Farm, all right? What I say is home is where the Kubota is. That's redoing my backyard. These aren't big lots. This is a 40 by 80 lot, and it's got a house on it, and I'm just doing around the edges, but I still make much more than I need. Look at the productivity here. This is bananas. I have bananas all winter long. I have a regular crop of bananas. I have a banana forest. I have 5 varieties of guavas, avocado. I have a 70-year-old avocado tree producing fuerte avocados that you can't get in the store because the skins are too thin and they can't be shipped. I got cherimoyas. Other seasons, in a subtropical area like I'm in, taro root does better than regular potatoes, so I sell taro potatoes. I got chayote squash, guavas, limes, So there's just no reason. And of course, it's all done with compost. The neighbors bring me compost. The way to fight plastic pollution, in my opinion, is to have local organic food production, because you don't have to wrap it in plastic. Packaging is 50% of the problem when it comes to plastic pollution. And my customers carry their stuff home in a basket. They don't have to wrap it up, and they bring me their scraps. Long Beach is really bad. We don't have a green bin. We only have a trash bin and a recycle bin. And because we have the last incinerator in the state of California, the surf plant, and they send their organics to the incinerator. And we're just really behind the curve. So I have to do it on my own. I get my neighbors to bring me their compost. I compost it and return it to the soil and have regenerative agriculture in that way. So I don't think we have to take food scraps out of the city. I think we have to build a city that can accept food scraps. I think we have to have a city where we have what we have in Long Beach is a county fair where you can take your produce and win. This is chocolate pudding fruit. The chocolate persimmon grows really good in my garden. I also started a larger farm that started as a company garden next to my business, where I fed we had lunches for the employees grown with the produce, and that turned into the Long Beach Food Co-op, and then later to the Gladys Avenue Urban Farm. And we have educational programs there talking about plastic in the ocean. We're able to go to farmers market. And actually, we had the TED conference in Long Beach, and the caterer, Chef Paul Buchanan of Primal Alchemy, did a futures contract with me where he told me what he wanted to serve at the TED conference 9 months before. And I started growing the crops for basically created a farmer's market inside the TED conference in Long Beach. So that was cool. Then we also have Cambodian community in Long Beach, the largest one outside of Phnom Penh. And they've started the May Center for Survivors of the Cambodian Genocide. And they're doing regenerative agriculture there. I helped them get started. And this is their sculpture on the Gladys Avenue Urban Farm. We got all the local farmers together now. This is really great. They all got together to discuss what's happening. And basically what's going on is that we've got this plot out here where we had the growing experience. TGE stands for the growing experience. May is meditation, agriculture, yoga, and education. That's the Cambodian therapy group for survivors of the genocide. What they want to do now is take this over and build apartments on it. And I think we have to make a stand and say no new building without extended developer responsibility. We talk about extended producer responsibility for plastics. We need extended developer responsibility. They want to build 1,000 apartments on a small piece of land and have no infrastructure to deal with the consequences. Because if we don't deal with it and have an infrastructure, we're going to be constantly involved in this situation, which is what I find constantly in my work in plastics, is the pretend to recycle part. So I want to just leave you guys with the idea that we need a new concept, extended developer responsibility, EDR, no increase in urban density without a corresponding increase in urban agriculture. That's my position, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Charlie Moore. I think that's just about the end of this panel. I want you, if you're interested in beginning to start a program in your own community, you can go to our website, Cool Now, and you'll get more information on each of these different topics from each of these different presenters there. And then we want you to start and move on forward. Did any of the speakers want to say a few words before we left? I will open that up for, we got about, I figure.
Got any questions in the chat?
About wind. Wind on carbon farming for Kevin. Are you still there, Kevin? I don't know if you are. Oh, he had to leave. So
I'm here, Rick. Go ahead.
Somebody wanted to know if wind caused a problem moving your mulch around in the system.
Compost, not mulch.
Okay.
Does wind cause a problem? No. I mean, it obviously it can. If you put it down in front of a tornado, you're going to have a problem. But generally, you do want to put it down before the next rain. Typically, you put it down in before your rainy season comes. But it sticks. It's fine.
Okay, well, Enzo, do you want to say something? I see you here. We're at the end of this panel. But Enzo Favoni is our international expert, and he'll be on the next panel on international. And this panel is over. I thank you very much for your cooperation. And cool now, let's go out and start a program in your community to get the organics out of landfill for good food, healthy soils, and jobs. Thank you.